Hi there, this is Lisa Coppola with another in our series of employment law videos to give you short and useful tips about employment law under the state and federal codes. And today we're going to be talking about something called the I-9 form. What is that? It's called the Employment Eligibility Verification Form. It's something the federal government requires that every employee and employer complete when somebody is hired newly on the job. And what does that say? Well, it's a document, it's a couple-page document with information in it that establishes that the employee has the right to work in the United States. In other words, is eligible to work here. And sometimes the Federal Department of Labor conducts audits, conducts visits to employers where it checks to see if these I-9 forms have been completed and that, as a result, the employees at that business or company are eligible to work in the United States. So that's what an I-9 form is. Well, when do you complete it? You must complete it within the first couple of days of your employee's start date. That doesn't have to be precisely on the first day, but that's always a good idea. And so for HR professionals and hiring managers and small business owners, be sure to tell your prospects, your newly hired employees, to bring with them proof of their eligibility to work in the United States. For anyone with a passport, that's a simple answer. Bring in the passport and show it to your employer. If you don't have a passport then, or your employee doesn't have it, ask them to bring 2 forms of identification. And simply going to uscis.gov will bring up an I-9 form and show you the list of those sorts of identification that qualify. Here in New York, something as simple as a driver's license and a social security card would be sufficient. And so the document is completed and signed by the employee, and then the employer must also complete information on the document and make sure to physically review that eligibility verification identification, right? You have to look at that passport and read it, make sure it's still a valid passport. You have to look at that New York State driver's license, make sure it's still an effective driver's license. In other words, it hasn't lapsed. And then it's a really good idea to make a photocopy of that evidence and put it together with that completed I-9 form. Now, where do you keep that form? Maybe a default thought would be, well, put it in the personnel folder of that new employee. I'm here to tell you that's not a best practice. The best practice instead is to keep a file with all of your employees' I-9 forms in one place, separate and apart from the personnel folder. And the reason you do that is pretty obvious and pretty logical. If the Department of Labor or USCIS chooses to come in and audit and asks for all of the records of I-9s, you certainly don't want to be pulling out and putting across a conference room table all of your personnel records, folders, documents, and materials. What you want is a concise, separate folder with I-9 forms of all your current employees, and of course, even once someone has departed, you want to keep that I-9 on file with your former employment or employee records. So this is a short tip about new hire procedures and best practices involving the federal I-9 form. We here at the Coppola Firm can answer these and other questions for employers who are here in New York State and are building their businesses step by step. Be sure to like and subscribe to our channel, and we will have more employment law and other legal tips for you as time goes on. For now, this is Lisa Coppola from the Coppola Firm. Thanks for being with us.